Canada is 10 million square kilometers of silence. We are used to thinking that emptiness is safe, that there is nothing in it but trees and wind. But when you work in forestry like I do, you learn to distinguish between two types of silence. The first is when the forest is sleeping. The second is when the forest is holding its breath because it is watching you. My brother Marcus disappeared into that second kind of silence in October of 2018, and I have spent the last 6 years trying to understand a simple, terrifying fact. The void is never truly empty. I need to tell someone about what happened to my brother because the RCMP closed the investigation in February of 2019, and nobody in my family is the same anymore. We are a house of cards that has already fallen, just lying scattered on the floor. I am 34 years old now. I work as a forestry technician for the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources. My job is literally to measure the wilderness, to quantify the trees and the soil. I am a man of data. I believe in topographic maps, in soil pH levels, in the specific tensile strength of climbing rope. I do not believe in ghosts. I do not believe in monsters. Or at least I did not. Marcus was my younger brother by 3 years. He was the chaotic counterweight to my order. While I went to university to study environmental science, Marcus stayed in Thunder Bay. He was the kind of guy who could fix a transmission with duct tape and baling wire, who knew every back road and logging trail in northern Ontario like they were extensions of his own driveway. He worked as a hunting guide, taking American tourists into the bush every fall to bag moose and black bear. He loved that life. He loved the smell of gun oil and wet wool. We had a tradition. It was the one thing that kept us grounded as we got older and our lives drifted apart. Every October, just after Thanksgiving, we would take a week off. No wives, no girlfriends, no cell phones. We would head up to our family's cabin on Lake Nipigon, about 2.5 hours northwest of Thunder Bay. The planning for the 2018 trip started in August. That's how we operated. I remember the email thread vividly. Subject line, Operation Walleye. Marcus had sent a list of supplies that read like a doomsday prepper's inventory. 2 cases of Labatt Blue. 4 pounds of venison jerky, spicy. 20-pound propane tank. New mantles for the Coleman lanterns. I replied with my usual logistical nagging. Check the weather, Mark. They recalling for an early freeze. Bring the 20 sleeping bag, not the cheap one you bought at Canadian Tire. I was living in Sault Ste. Marie at the time. The drive to Thunder Bay is roughly 700 kilometers of the most beautiful and desolate highway in North America, Highway 17. It hugs the coast of Lake Superior, winding through rock cuts that weave groundwater and forests that look like they have not been touched since the glaciers retreated. I left on Sunday, October 14th. I drove a 2015 Ford F-150. The cab filled with the smell of stale Tim Hortons coffee and that specific, plasticky scent of synthetic camping gear. I remember stopping in Wawa at the giant goose statue to stretch my legs. The air was already biting, hovering around 8 degrees Celsius. It had that crisp, metallic tang to it, the smell of dying leaves and damp earth. I bought a bag of chaotic mix, pretzels, Cheetos, peanuts, and a fresh large double-double. The radio signal fades in and out along that stretch. You get bursts of CBC Radio 1, then an hour of static, then maybe a country station from Michigan drifting across the lake. I listened to a Joe Rogan podcast I had downloaded, something about ancient civilizations, just background noise to the drone of my all-terrain tires on the asphalt. I felt safe. That's the seductive lie of a modern vehicle. You are in a climate-controlled bubble with heated seats and a touchscreen dashboard. You forget that just 3 feet to your left, beyond the glass, is a wilderness that does not care if you live or die. I reached Marcus's place in Thunder Bay around 6:00 p.m. He lived in a small bungalow on the outskirts of town, the kind of place with a gravel driveway and a snowmobile permanently parked on the front lawn under a blue tarp. When he opened the door, he looked tired. Not just physical fatigue, but something deeper. His eyes were rimmed with red, and he had a nervous energy I had not seen since we were teenagers, and he de-crashed our dad's truck. "You make good time?" he asked, grabbing my duffel bag. His grip was hard, almost too hard. 7 hours flat, I said. "Did you get the ice?" "Yeah, cooler S in the truck." Let us go. I want to beat the sunset. Mark, it's 6 o'clock. Sun's already down. He glanced at the street, scanning the darkening neighborhood. I know. Let us just go. That was the first crack. The first tiny fracture in the reality I thought I knew. Marcus was never in a rush. He was the guy who would stop to look at a hawk for 20 minutes. But that night, he threw his gear into the back of my truck with a frantic urgency, constantly looking over his shoulder at the empty street. I did not ask. I should have asked. Instead, I rationalized. End of the guiding season, I told myself. Yes, burned out. Dealing with rich tourists for 6 weeks will make anyone jumpy. We drove north into the dark. The cabin is not much. It was built by our grandfather in the late 70s. A 2-room structure made of rough-hewn pine logs that have turned silver gray with age. There is no electricity. No running water. The heat comes from an ancient cast iron wood stove that eats birch logs like candy. The light comes from hissing propane lanterns that cast long, wavering shadows against the walls. The road in is a logging trail, barely wide enough for the Ford. We bounced over washboards and navigated around potholes deep enough to swallow a tire. The suspension groaned, a rhythmic thud squeak, that was the only sound for the last 40 minutes of the drive. We arrived around 9:30 p.m. The headlights swept across the cabin, illuminating the boarded-up windows and the front porch covered in pine needles. When I killed the engine, the silence hit us like a physical blow. It was not just quiet. It was a vacuum. Usually, even in October, you hear the wind in the jack pines, or the lapping of the lake against the granite shore, or the hoot of a boreal owl. But this was dead silence. Absolute. I opened the door and stepped out. The air smelled of wet cedar and something else. Something faint and sulphurous, like a match struck an hour ago. Leave the lights on for a second, Marcus said. He was standing by the tailgate, his head cocked to the side. He was not unpacking. He was listening. You hear a bear? I asked, reaching for my flashlight, a heavy mag light that felt cold in my hand. No, he whispered. Just listen. We stood there for a full minute. My breath plumed in the red glow of the taillights. The cold seeped through my jeans. I heard the engine block ticking as it cooled. Tick, tick, tick. Nothing, Mark. That's just the woods. He exhaled, a sharp, jagged sound. Yeah, okay. Let us get inside. We unpacked in a rush. I unlocked the heavy padlock on the door, a master lock that had rusted slightly over the winter, and we stepped into the musty, stagnant air of the cabin. It smelled of dust, mice, and old wood smoke. While I primed the lantern, tying the delicate little silk mantles onto the gas nozzle, Marcus started unloading the food. We had brought Costco ribeye steaks for the first night, thick, marbled cuts that we usually grilled over the open fire pit outside. Let us cook inside tonight, Marcus said, placing the steaks on the counter. I looked at him, match in hand. The lantern flared to life, filling the room with a harsh, white hiss of light. Inside? Nicer out. Sky is clear. We can see the Milky Way. I said inside. Okay? He snapped. Then he softened, rubbing his face with calloused hands. Sorry. My back is killing me. I just want to sit down. Rationalization number 2. Back pain. It made sense. Hauling moose quarters out of the bush destroys your lumbar support. Sure, I said. Pan-fried it is. I got the Coleman camp stove going, the classic green 2-burner model. The smell of propane mixed with the metallic tang of the raw meat. I threw a knob of butter into the cast iron skillet, listening to the satisfying shhhhhhh as it melted and foamed. We ate at the small wooden table, the light hissing above us. The steaks were perfect. Seared dark brown on the outside, blood rare in the middle, seasoned with just salt and cracked pepper. But Marcus barely ate. He cut his meat into tiny, precise squares, moving them around his plate. Every few minutes, his eyes would dart to the window. The windows were just black rectangles reflecting the interior of the cabin. You could not see out, but anyone out there could see in perfectly. You want to tell me what's going on? I asked, putting my fork down. The screech of the tines against the enamel plate seemed incredibly loud. Marcus took a sip of his beer. He looked at the window again. I think someone followed me. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. Followed you? From Thunder Bay? No. Before that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his iPhone. Look. He swiped through the gallery. The photos were grainy digital zooms. First photo, a hunting camp clearing. In the far background, barely visible through a break in the trees, was a gray Dodge Ram pickup truck. Second photo, a gas station in Armstrong. The same truck parked at the pumps, the driver's face obscured by the glare of the windshield. Third photo, the boat launch at Dog Lake. The truck again parked facing the water. It's a common truck, Mark, I said, my voice trying to find the logic. Dodge Rams are the most popular truck in Northern Ontario. It's probably just another guide or a contractor. It's the same truck, Marcus insisted. Look at the bumper. Passenger side. There's a dent shaped like a kidney bean. It's in every picture. I looked closer. He was right. A small, concave depression in the chrome. Okay, I said slowly. So you have a stalker? An angry client? An ex-girlfriend? I do not know, Marcus whispered. I've never seen the driver clearly. Just a shape, a baseball cap. But he's always there, watching. And today, he hesitated. I thought I saw it turn onto the logging road behind us. We would have seen the headlights, I argued. It's pitch black. Not if he was driving with his lights off. I laughed. A short, nervous bark of a laugh. Driving that road with lights off? You de-brake an axle in 10 feet. You re-paranoid, man. You need sleep. I stood up and walked to the window. I cupped my hands against the glass to block out the reflection and peered into the darkness. Nothing. Just the vague shapes of the spruce trees and the glimmer of the lake beyond. See? I said, turning back. Nothing. But as I turned, I saw Marcus freeze. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the door. The heavy wooden door, which we had shut but not bolted. From the other side, there was a sound. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It sounded like someone running a fingernail specifically down the grain of the wood. Slow, deliberate, testing the texture. The silence in the cabin was instant. The hissing of the propane lantern seemed to roar like a jet engine. Did you hear that? Marcus mouthed. I nodded. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic drum solo. It's a raccoon, I told myself. Or a porcupine chewing on the wood for the salt. I walked to the door. I am 6'2". I had a fillet knife on the table within reach. I was not going to be intimidated by a rodent. I grabbed the handle and ripped the door open, swinging the flashlight beam into the night. Hey! I shouted. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the porch rails, the woodpile, the path leading down to the lake. There was nothing there. I swept the light left, then right. The pine needles on the ground were undisturbed. The air was still dead calm. See, I exhaled, turning back to Marcus with a forced grin. Porcupine, probably scampered under the porch. But Marcus did not smile. He was pointing at the floorboards of the porch, right where I was standing. I looked down. On the gray, dry wood of the porch, there was a wet footprint. It was not a boot print. It was a bare foot, long narrow toes splayed wide. And it was not water. The liquid was dark, viscous, and it smelled. A sudden waft hitting my nose, like copper and spoiled meat. I stepped back, slamming the door and throwing the deadbolt. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the flashlight. That was not a porcupine, Marcus whispered. We did not sleep. We sat up in the main room, the wood stove roaring despite the fact that we were sweating. I had placed the fillet knife on the table between us. Marcus had his hunting rifle a .30-06 bolt action, leaning against his chair. It was not loaded, but the box of shells was open on the table. For 2 hours, nothing happened. The wind picked up around midnight, whistling through the chinking in the logs, making the whole cabin groan. Every creak sounded like a footstep. Every branch tapping the roof sounded like a knuckle rapping on the door. Then, at 1:14 a.m., I remember the time because I was staring at the digital face of my Casio watch. There was a knock. Not a scratch this time. A knock. 3 distinct, heavy raps. Thud, 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 came from the front door. Marcus grabbed the rifle. His face was pale, shiny with sweat. "Do not answer it," he hissed. "Who is it?" I called out. My voice cracked. I sounded like a child, not a 34-year-old man. Silence. Then, a voice. It was muffled by the thick wood, but audible. It was a man's voice, flat and monotone, devoid of any inflection. "My car broke down," the voice said. "I need water." I looked at Marcus. We were 20 kilometers from the nearest paved road. "Nobody just happens to be here." "We do not have a phone," I yelled back. "We ca not help you." "I do not need a phone," the voice said. "I am thirsty." The phrasing was wrong. It was too formal, too clinical. I moved to the window next to the door. I knew I should not, but I had to see. I nudged the curtain aside just an inch. The porch light was not on, we did not have one. But the moon had come out from behind the clouds. Illuminated in the spectral blue light, standing on the bottom step of the porch, was a man. He was tall, maybe 6'5", wearing a red plaid lumberjack jacket that looked too big for him and dirty jeans. But it was his posture that made my stomach turn over. He was standing perfectly still, not swaying, not shifting his weight. His arms hung limp at his sides like pendulums at rest. He was not looking at the door. He was looking directly at the sliver of window where I was peeking out. His face was wrong. It was smooth, unlined, like wax that had been slightly melted. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, and he was smiling. But the smile did not reach his eyes. It was just a baring of teeth, a mechanical retraction of lips. "I can see you," he said. His lips did not seem to synchronize with the words. I let the curtain fall back. I stumbled away from the window, backing into the table. The knife clattered to the floor. "He sees me," I whispered to Marcus. "He sees me." "Is it him?" Marcus asked. "Is it the guy in the truck?" "I do not know." "Yes, wearing a hat. A baseball cap. Blue." Marcus went white. "That's him." "Open the door," the voice said from outside. It was not shouting. It was speaking at a conversational volume, yet it sounded like he was right next to my ear. "It is very cold. I am very thirsty." "Go away," Marcus shouted, racking the bolt of his rifle. The sound of metal on metal was loud and aggressive. "I have a gun." Silence again. Then, a sound I will never forget. Laughter. But it was not a human laugh. It was a rhythmic, dry hacking sound. Hep, 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 like a recording being played at the wrong speed. "Okay," the voice said. "I will wait." Then we heard footsteps. Heavy, crunching footsteps walking off the porch. But they did not go down the path to the road. They went around the cabin. We heard the crunch of dry leaves moving along the east wall. Then the north wall. Then the west wall. He was circling us. He did this for an hour. Round and round and round. We could track his position by the sound of his boots. Sometimes he would stop, and we would hear the soft thump of a hand pressing against the logs, testing for a weak point. Sometimes he would run his fingers along the glass of the windows, a high-pitched squeal that made my teeth ache. "He's looking for a way in," Marcus whispered. He was holding the rifle so tight his knuckles were white. "Why does not he just break a window?" I asked. The logic part of my brain was trying to surface, trying to understand the tactics. "If he wants in, he could just smash the glass." "He's playing," Marcus said. "He's hunting." Around 3 a.m., the footsteps stopped. They stopped right outside the back wall, where the wood stove chimney exited the cabin. We waited. 10 minutes. 20. "Is he gone?" I whispered. "I do not know." Then we heard it. A scratching sound. But this time it was not on the walls. It was above us. He was on the roof. There is a specific acoustic quality to a cedar-shingled roof. It acts like a drum skin. When a pinecone falls, it sounds like a gunshot. When a squirrel runs across it, it sounds like a bowling ball. When a 200-pound entity walks on it, the sound is tectonic. Creak, groan, snap. Dust drifted down from the ceiling rafters, dancing in the harsh white light of the propane lantern. Marcus and I stood in the center of the room, looking up. The rifle barrel followed the sound, tracing a path from the eaves toward the peak. "He's going for the chimney," Marcus whispered. His voice was so tight it sounded like tearing paper. I looked at the wood stove. It was an old Jotul cast iron box, black and rusted. The pipe went straight up through a metal collar in the roof. If the thing on the roof pulled the cap off, there was nothing stopping it from dropping something down or climbing down itself. "Stoke the fire," I said. My logic brain was back, firing in erratic bursts. "Make it too hot. If he tries to come down, burn him." I grabbed the last 3 logs from the wood box, seasoned birch with the peeling white bark. I threw them in, not caring about the sparks that flew out onto the linoleum floor. I opened the damper wide. The stove roared. The metal sides began to tick and ping as they expanded. The heat became oppressive, a wall of dry, suffocating warmth in the small cabin. Above us, the footsteps stopped right next to the stovepipe. We heard a metallic clang, the chimney cap being tested. Then, a sound that made my knees give out. It was a sniffing sound, loud, wet inhalations amplified by the metal tube. Snuff, snuff, snuff. It was smelling the smoke. It was smelling us. I backed away until my shoulders hit the kitchen counter. I knocked a box of diamond matches onto the floor. I did not pick them up. I just stared at the black iron pipe, waiting for it to buckle, waiting for a hand to reach down. But it did not. The sniffing stopped. Then came the scratching again. But this time it was rhythmic. Scritch, scratch. Scritch, scratch. "What is he doing?" Marcus whimpered. He was shaking so hard the rifle barrel was vibrating. I think he's writing," I said. The realization made me nauseous. He's carving something into the shingles. This went on for 20 minutes. The scratching, the shifting weight, the silence of the woods outside, which felt heavy and complicit. And then, abruptly, the weight lifted. We heard a heavy thump on the ground outside, near the back of the cabin. Then footsteps walking away into the bush. Not running. Walking. Casual. Leisurely. We did not move. We did not speak. We stood there, sweating in the overheated room, listening to the fire consume the last of the wood. "He's gone," Marcus said finally. He lowered the rifle. "No," I said. "He's waiting." The rest of the night was a blur of microsleeps and adrenaline spikes. We did not have any more firewood inside, and neither of us was willing to open the door to get more from the pile on the porch. So we watched the fire die. It's a psychological torture, watching your only source of light and heat fade. First the roar turns to a crackle. Then the flames disappear, leaving only glowing red coals. Then the coals turn gray, pulse once or twice, and go dark. The cabin cooled rapidly. The temperature outside was dropping to -4. Inside, we could see our breath again. I sat on the floor with my back against the refrigerator, which we used as a cupboard since there was no power. Marcus sat on the pull-out couch, the rifle across his lap. We did not talk about the man. We did not talk about the truck. We talked about safe things. "Remember the time we flipped the canoe on the French River?" Marcus asked. His voice was raspy. "Yeah," I said. "Dad was so mad he did not speak to us for 3 days." "That was a good trip," Marcus said. He was staring at the dark window. "I miss Dad." "Me too. Do you think—" Marcus hesitated. "Do you think we're going to die here?" "No," I lied. "Sun comes up in 3 hours. We pack up. We drive out. We go straight to the OPP station in Nipigon." "He would not let us leave," Marcus said. He said it with such certainty that I did not have a rebuttal. Around 4:30 a.m., I must have passed out. It was not a choice. My body just shut down. I remember the sound of the wind picking up, rattling the loose pane in the window frame. I remember the smell of cold ash and the stale, metallic scent of fear sweat. I dreamed of the truck. The gray Dodge Ram. In my dream, I was driving it. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I did not see my own face. I saw the man with the wax face, and he was sitting in the back seat, smiling. I woke up to the sound of a jay screaming. I jerked awake, my neck stiff, my mouth tasting like copper. The cabin was freezing. Sunlight, bright, hard, October sunlight, was streaming through the dirty windows, illuminating the dust motes in the air. "Marcus," I croaked. The couch was empty. The sleeping bag was rumpled, pushed to the floor. The rifle was gone. "Mark?" I scrambled up, my boots skidding on the linoleum. I ran to the door. It was wide open. I stepped out onto the porch. The air was crisp and cold, smelling of frost and pine resin. The lake was calm, a sheet of glass reflecting the blue sky. It looked like a postcard. It looked completely innocent. "Marcus," I screamed. My voice echoed off the rocky shore, bouncing back at me. "Marcus, Marcus." I ran to the truck parking spot. The spot where we had hidden the Ford was empty. The ground was churned up, fresh mud thrown against the spruce trunks. But Marcus's truck, which we had hidden, was gone. My truck, the Ford, was still there, parked exactly where I left it. Wait, no. I ran to the spot. Marcus's truck was gone. He had taken his keys. I looked at the ground. There were tire tracks backing out, erratic and weaving, tearing up the moss. And over top of the tire tracks, there were footprints. Bare footprints. They followed the truck tracks down the driveway. I did not pack. I did not clean up. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and the fillet knife. I jumped into my Ford and turned the key. The engine sputtered. It turned over, whined, and died. "No, no, no," I begged. I hit the steering wheel. "Please." I tried again. Chug, chug, chug. Vroom. Caught. I slammed it into reverse, not waiting for it to warm up, and tore out of the clearing. I drove that logging road at 80 kilometers an hour, bottoming out the suspension, smashing the oil pan against rocks. I did not care. I needed to get to the highway. I needed to get signal. When I finally hit the pavement of Highway 11, I pulled onto the shoulder and vomited. I dry heaved for 5 minutes, until there was nothing left but bile. Then I called 911. The police arrived at the cabin 3 hours later. 2 OPP cruisers and a forensic van. I led them back. I showed them the door. I showed them the footprints on the porch. Except they were not there. The sun had melted the frost. The blood I had seen the night before? The officer crouched down, touched the wood, and smelled his finger. "Sap," he said. "Pine sap. Looks like a darker variety, maybe mixed with some dirt." "But the smell," I insisted. "It smelled like meat." "Stress does funny things to the senses, sir," he said. They climbed onto the roof. I waited on the ground, hugging myself to stop the shivering. "There's nothing up here," the officer called down. "Some scratched shingles from a branch, maybe, but no carvings." "He was writing," I yelled. "I heard him writing." They came down. They looked at me with that look, the one that says pity and suspicion in equal measure. They took my statement. They put out a bolo for Marcus's truck. They found it in December, abandoned at the rest stop, just like I said in the beginning. But here is the part that keeps me awake at night. The part one did not tell the police because they would have committed me. Last year, when I went back to search, the trip where I found the campsite with the Mr. October 16th carving, I found something else. I was walking the perimeter of that old mine site, pushing through dense brush. I found a hollow in a rock face, a small cave barely big enough for a man to curl up in. Inside, hidden under a pile of dead leaves, was a red plaid lumberjack jacket. It was filthy, stiff with grime and mold, but I recognized it. It was the jacket the man on the porch had been wearing. I pulled it out with a stick. As I did, something fell out of the pocket. It was a cell phone, an iPhone with a cracked screen. I knew that phone. It was Marcus's. I took it home. I charged it. I guessed the passcode, 0429, our mom's birthday. There was one video in the camera roll, timestamped October 17th, 2018. 3:42 a.m. Played it. The video is dark, just the interior of the cabin illuminated by the dying embers of the stove. The camera is shaking violently. You can hear Marcus's breathing shallow, terrified gasps. He is filming me. I am asleep against the refrigerator. The camera pans slowly to the window. Outside, pressing against the glass, is a face. But it is not the wax-faced man. That's me. That's my face. My eyes wide and unblinking. My mouth stretched into a smile that is too wide, showing too many teeth. The me outside raises a hand and waves. The me inside the cabin sleeps on. Then the video ends. I do not know what happened that night. I do not know who or what was outside. I do not know if the thing I saw was a doppelganger, or if Marcus was hallucinating, or if I lost my mind and do not remember doing it. All I know is that Canada is 10 million square kilometers of silence. And somewhere in that silence, my brother is still waiting for me to open the door.